What's going on, Soul Tribe? And welcome to Alchemist Astrology. Justin here, and are you ready to get into those lunar shenanigans? Because, this is a fascinating week. It starts off, we'll start off in the void, of course. so that's just kind of empty energy kind of to start things off. Moon doesn't have anything to attach to, and then it goes from like this quiet, and then it's just busy. But the first pocket is an interesting one. I think there could be some opportunities, a little interesting little pocket of sextiles that are happening towards the middle of the week, and then it kind of ends on a bit of bumpiness there. So we're going to get into all that here in a moment. But if you're new here, again, my name is Justin, and one of the things that I do in this channel is talk about the lunar shenanigans, which just means I talk about the astrology of the moon, what sign it's in, what phase it's in, when it happens to go void, of course, and just to get a feel of the energies each week as the moon is making these different transits and aspects with the other celestial bodies here. The moon is closely represented with the people, closely represented with the body, our possessions, home. So we love that good old moon. But before we dive into that, if you want to support the work that I do further, down in the description box below is a link for my Patreon, and I have 2 tiers there. One of them is for the Lucky Day podcast, and it talks about the most auspicious dates for the month for any endeavor that you're wanting to initiate, and the second tier will give you access to that, plus a personalized monthly transit report from me. So, I'm just popping up monthly, just like, hey, just like that. So if that's something that you're interested in, definitely go check that out as well. But let's go ahead and jump into it, because I'm going to be covering the week of January 20th through the 26th, 2026. Feels like January's just been really just kind of zipped by there. Busy month. busy. But you know what? The moon's not busy. Because when we're starting off the week here, the moon's just kind of void of course right now, and I think that started yesterday on the depending on when you're watching this. That started on the on the 18th actually. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because the moon, about 6:02. Oh, perfect. So I can see, because I'm going to be able to catch that moon Venus conjunction. All right. So look at that. Good news before the void, of course. But right now the moon is just kind of finishing up its time in Aquarius. Happy solar return for those with your sun in Aquarius. As you see, if you're watching the video here, I have the chart up of just of the moon entering into Pisces here in a bit. But before the moon enters into that, it's co-present with the sun, Venus, and now Mercury here. That Cazimi is getting a bit closer. That Mercury Cazimi for that, but then the moon will move into Pisces at about 10:49 p.m. and that'll be Pacific time. And I think that this is an energy to when we think of Pisces, I think just on a general scale, it's ruled by Big Papa Jupiter, which is great because, as you see, that's already good news, because then the moon and Jupiter are in mutual reception. This is this is a really nice aspect in that the moon does every month. A chance for some ease. We'll get into more of that when I talk about that aspect. But the moon in Pisces, like I said, is ruled by Big Papa traditionally, and is the mutable water sign, is one of the nocturnal signs. So, more kind of has a more receptive quality. And, I was actually listening to a podcast today, and it was talking about how porous the water or the ground is in New Orleans. And as I haven't been there, so I can't really attest to this. But that was the kind of imagery that I thought about, especially those kind of interactions when just like earth and water. So, sort of like sextile aspects, which we'll talk about. But Pisces gives me that sort of porousness. There's this vastness. There's that, I think, that strong representation of like the ocean. You think of the fish swimming through the sea, and it's, there's not really a concept of the water. It's just the ocean. It's fascinating. I think with Pisces energy, I think that's one where to just kind of pay attention to how we're connecting with one another. How susceptible, and how the body can hold on to things. I think that's something to remember, and how the body remembers how something feels. That doesn't, I cut my finger not too long ago, and it's just like, it's this the moon's activated for me, and it's just like been feeling just the sensation of that is always like, But there's a certain emotion attached, to certain feelings around it, and I think that that's a time to really just kind of tune into oneself, the things that you're absorbing, how certain things make you feel, and what these feelings teach you. For me, it's taught me spatial awareness and how you handle your things, but moving a bit slower. And focusing the mind, and that may be something kind of tricky too with Pisces. That there could be more, and again, just in general, there could be more. And I think this could be real positive with the moon being here, more susceptible to like imagination, to let the mind wander a bit, and I think this is perfect for the moon being void of course right now, just to kind of just sort of be, the void of course was thought of a period not to initiate anything new, and I don't think it's a time where you're not doing anything. I think it could be a great time for wrapping some things up, for it before we start up any sort of new things, because the moon, and I should mention too when I talk about the void of course that I'm talking about from a Hellenistic standpoint. It said when the moon forms an aspect it goes longer than 30 degrees without forming an aspect. But I think that's something to pay attention to during this time, because by that standpoint, it doesn't happen that often. This is going to be the last and the longest of the void of courses that happen this month, and then we won't have another one until August. So, and I think that's a time to just kind of reflect, to see how energies levels are, how motivations are, things along those lines, especially when you're kind of getting a look at the lay of the land here. This is not a super busy time for the moon. The moon's going to form two aspects. You get one with Big Papa, the ruler of the moon, and then one with Saturn, which is an interesting one, which we're going to talk about here in a moment. But let me just keep going, because then we get to the 21st here, and the moon's just kind of just kind of floating around, just doing this, swimming in the Pisces Sea, just kind of being. And if you can find some time, to just maybe take a moment to just dip into the breath, or to, maybe do some sort of art, or just take a minute just to pause, and just kind of just be in the body for a minute, and just observing the things that you're feeling, in the body. I think it can be just I think it can be an enriching experience, whenever the moon is in, especially like when the moon's in the water signs, and it may be a little more intense in Scorpio, of course, where the moon has a little bit of trouble, but with Pisces, and then when it's home sign of Cancer, I think this is a nice time for the moon. I think it can be a comfortable, potentially comfortable space. Of course, it depends on what else is going on in the chart here. And I think it's something too to kind of pay attention while we're talking about feelings. Look at that. If you're watching the chart here, I just got the chart set about 11:59 p.m. Pacific time, and as you see, if you're watching the chart here, or if you're looking at the video version, if you're just listening, this Aquarius party is now starting to build up. The Aquarius, you were kind of wrapping up the activity that was maybe going on in the Capricorn section, depending on how busy that is. And then now the Aquarius parts of our charts are getting ready to get lit up. And then this is something too, I think, when we're thinking about it on a personal level, to know where those busy times are and where the more kind of quieter times are. When all those planets were in Capricorn, for me personally, the only thing that Capricorn aspects is my sun, so that's kind of nice sometimes to have those sort of quiet pockets to prepare for the for the show that happens when everything moves into Aquarius, and then it's talking to everything but my sun. So it's actually kind of it's interesting flip that happens. But I think that's something too, to just pay attention to what set, depending on if you use whole sign or if you use Placidus, what house you have, or houses do you have Aquarius in, and how's that's going to, is it going to be more like, do we have a lot of like trines and sextiles? So maybe we can do some collaboration. Maybe this can be a more easy time for you to get some things done. Or is it more of a time where you got myself, maybe you got a lot of oppositions that are getting ready to happen? I got one trine to the moon, but the rest is just it's an opposition storm. Oh, and let's not forget the conjunction with Saturn. Of course not Saturn. But yeah, so that's that's something to just kind of pay attention to your chart to see how that's being, and you can usually see how things. This is something I've been keeping eyes on for a minute, so it's like it's taken an interesting twist. I will say, but I'm not 100% mad at that. But it is, it has, the topics have been spot on as far as like where things are moving and how things are moving, and it's interesting. So you can definitely get eyes on that and just see like, okay, like there's just going to be this stellium there. So, or this is like, okay, let me just lean back while everybody else is just kind of, I chilled in Capricorn season to get prepared for Aquarius. So, and then it'll be chill in Pisces. So looking forward to that. And that can get, that can even just kind of give the mind some ease and kind of calm the stress down a little bit sometimes. But let's get into the 22nd, where now we're finally, where moon's finally forming some aspects here, because we get to the 22nd, the moon's waxing, and the moon's going to form a trine with Jupiter that's retrograde, and that means the void of course ends, and that's going to happen at about 8:40 a.m. Pacific time, and that's when if you're looking at the chart here, that's when the moon trines Jupiter here at 18 degrees and 28 minutes of Pisces, and Jupiter's in Cancer. Now, one thing that I was thinking about, we have tea here. But one thing that I was thinking about, I get these alerts, just like emails for just to see just like what general news is just kind of going on there, just to be kind of abreast with what's just happening. Talking about the moon, you need to see what the people are doing, to just kind of just to get an idea. And one sort of like, there was a nice, what I think was a great example of a moon-Jupiter trine, because a trine was what happens when the celestial bodies are 120 degrees apart from one another. So you have this same elements here, water energy that's happening here. And the trines are said to be this kind of sympathetic nature, beneficial, they're kind of said to be like Jupiterian in nature while we're talking about Big Papa, the most positive aspect here. And so we like that, that again, when you get this once a month, where, well, really kind of twice, it's a little different when the moon's in Scorpio, but it's still a trine, Jupiter would even be overcoming there, but you get these a couple times a month, these trines here, and it could just be just this, Jupiter's at relief from bad things, a moment, just the break, sometimes, it may not necessarily just be the gifts, but it could be just a moment to just like, again, just be for a bit, where things are because like, even though while this is happening, like I said, the moon is still co-present with Saturn, so it's still feeling that Saturnian energy, and that's still building. It doesn't, I think that the stressors are still kind of there. Time is still a ticking, but, that here's a time where it's not like, where it doesn't have to be just like super, or it has to be stressful, where you can take a break, allow yourself that time to treat the body, to do something good for the body. But I got this email today, that whole long thing to say, I got this email today, and it was talking about, it's from the food bank, and it's kind of local food bank around here, and it was just talking about just how the power of community, the power of the people, to be able to keep the abundance even amongst time of uncertainty, and that how heartening that is, that there is wildness that is happening. There's good thing that's happening too, and I think that's, to take these moments, these Jupiter trines and things, to take the good where they're at, because they can feel fleeting, and sometimes it is mixed with something. And it's, I was thinking about how in Vedic Valen's book, the anthology, that he mentions the colors that the ancients talk about. I think I've talked about this before, and Jupiter is brilliance. And because it's life-giving, and Jupiter's great, and and I may be a little biased too, just because I got Jupiter on the ascendant, but even in that brilliance, if you get a drop of something in it, let's say just a little black, even like, let's say I'm looking at the walls here, they're white, but if there's, you can, where the white's night, if there's something on it, the eye goes immediately to that, and it's tainted. And now, like, you know what I mean? And that it's blemished. And I think that sometimes we just, even if something is a little blemished, it reminds me of even just looking at produce. Sometimes you gotta maybe cut off some of the bad ends, but it's still, there's still gifts that are there, that Jupiter can bring in. Jupiter, again, like I think I've mentioned before, Big Papa's not where it's great in Cancer, but it's retrograde right now. Things are a bit delayed with it, being in that state. And so Big Papa's not able to give like it normally can, right now. And it's still, Mars is thankfully wrapping up it's like at least sign-based opposition with Jupiter there. So that's going to take some of that relief, take some of that pressure off that Mars has been putting on there, even in an exalted state. So, Jupiter's triumphed, and I think that it's just taking the wins where we can, whatever that means in your journey there. But then we get to the 23rd, and now it's busy. It's busy. And this energy stuff that's been building up for a while. Pisces was, and will be actually not just like, it'll be the end of Pisces going into Aries. But before the moon moves into Aries, which is pretty early, I do want to take a little, speaking of time and Saturn, I want to take a minute and talk about this conjunction here, the one with Saturn, because Saturn's going to, the moon will have that exact at 1:32 a.m. Pacific time, and that'll be the last time that the moon will have its, this conjunction with, that once a month conjunction with Saturn in Pisces. And that means that after this, we're going to be feeling things differently. They're going to be, those conversations are really going to be set in. It's going to be the letters and things of the Saturn and Aries chapter are really going to start rolling. So I think that this is a time to reflect on, what did I learn from this time of Saturn going through whatever house or houses it went through for you in while it was in Pisces, while it had its time there? Because by just the traditional planet, Saturn is the slowest moving one. And Saturn is, something I think really interesting about Saturn, that, we can make these observations and predictions for how these things will translate, but only time will tell. And I think Saturn, there's a reminder of that Saturnian element there, that things are, we can imagine things, but it's still has the, things can change at like the moon. 1 minute we're in Aries, the next we're in Taurus, the next will be in Gemini. Things get so. My point with this is that we're what was the lessons that you learned during that Saturn and Pisces period? Are there any sort of last things that you want to get wrapped up and get moved, make sure that things are moving forward so that you can get ready for the Saturn in Aries that's going to be happening? Because that's going to happen. That conjunction happens on the next time the moon does the conjunction with Mars, with Saturn, will be on the 19th of February, and then Saturn will be comfortably in Aries. Comfortably in it. Well, not comfortably. It'll be maybe a little irritated in its fall of Aries. So, that's something to think about with this kind of moon conjunction there. Just because, again, that's the moon represents the gatherings of the masses, the people. Things of maybe new projects that are happening in the city or in like cities. Like in your city or wherever you happen to be. Maybe this is happening in your home. Some sort of like relationships dynamics are changing, things like that. But then after that, that's a lot to ponder in the early hour, depending on what time zone you're in the early hours here. But then the moon moves into Aries, and that's going to happen at about 5:25 a.m. Pacific time. Now, when we look at the lay of the land here, it's interesting too. Mars just entered, if you're watching this, and I'll let you know if you're listening, Mars just is about 8 minutes into Aquarius. So now the Aquarius party's on, and that's the first conversation that the moon's going to be having, but it's these series of sextiles that are going to be happening. This is a busy little pocket here. It's not doing anything with Saturn, but it's going to sort of form sextiles with those with Mars, the Sun, Mercury, and Venus, and then we'll have a square with Big Papa at coming up here. But first, the Moon's going to form a sextile with Mars. Now, with sextiles, they're where the celestial bodies are 60 degrees apart from one another, and they're like the trines, but they're a little bit weaker. And I think that a Moon Mars on a more constructive scale can be this opportunity to get something moving, some sort of like collaborative project. Maybe you've been wanting to get on a workout routine. Maybe you've been wanting to, this could be signing up for with a business partner or something like that. That Moon sextile the Sun, maybe you and a friend, like the Sun, where you're thinking about Sun representing friendship, and friends could be something where, just kind of partnering with someone there to get an idea. Mercury sextile or your Moon sextile Mercury, something that you're creating together, that you're maybe selling on the market. Venus, maybe making some kind of money there. Mercury getting some, even the moons can represent the gains and expansions of things. So maybe you have a new, maybe this Moon Saturn conjunction, sparks some sort of okay, let me think of some kind of long-term plan. Let me this opportunity to get motivated to Mars, to get just get inspired, get, really kind of shining a light on something with that kind of Sun there, maybe even talking about this sort of thing, or maybe taking notes, getting the blueprints for this right now. This is a great time, for Moon, when the Moon's waxing, we like when the Moon's waxing, because then that's really promoting that idea of growth and things. So, it's a very interesting, sort of pocket there. Now, where I do like the sextiles, I do think that is something to keep in mind here, that where, malefics are still malefics, there can be where with this Mars, this kind of sextile Mars, this could be where we're overcoming a situation, but it was something that was, maybe there were some kind of challenges that were presented there. Maybe there were some hostilities at some points. Maybe there was a conflicts of interest or something like that. Or maybe there was, whatever that could potentially be. And then that overcoming in that sort of regard there. But this is definitely, I think, a very, kind of a busy pocket, during this period of time. So, especially we're kind of looking at that kind of early phases there. I definitely feel, seems like some busyness. It kind of maybe potentially happening. So it is something to just kind of pay attention to there. Oh, but before I move on for that, I'm just thinking about the Moon in Aries in general. Just thinking about it. Its ruler is Mars, and it's the cardinal fire sign. It is, one of the diurnal signs, so more active in nature. And, I think of, Aries is just that impulse to do, that just the fire's just there, when it's inspired. Why wait? Let's do this. Let's just do this. Let's do this now because, then I may change my mind. I want to do something else, so let's get some things going. I think it can be really kind of just motivating time. I personally like when the planet's going through Aries for the most part. It's it squares my Sun, which is meh, but otherwise it's just trine city. Trine city. So I'm not usually mad. And then sextiles my natal Moon. Yeah, I'm here for it. I'm usually here for Aries and Libra. Those are about the busiest pockets, I think, in my chart. Maybe Taurus and Scorpio might be one more. But I like a Moon in Aries. That can be very, I think, invigorating. I think that can be very, just very lively, And I think that it doesn't have to be, it's not quite I don't think it's a flashy energy when we're talking about Aries. I think that it's just something that it's impressive. I think that when you see the feats that can be accomplished in Aries, when we just go for the thing. So. Yeah, but it's so that's pretty much what I want to say about the Moon in Aries. But let's go ahead and move into the 24th of January, because then the Moon is going to square Big Papa. Now, the squares are when these celestial bodies are 90 degrees apart from one another. So there's that like modality, So in this instance, cardinal signs here between Aries and Cancer. Now, the squares were thought to be more inharmonious and kind of unpleasant. They are more martial in nature. But these are like one of those kind of active points. The conjunction, the opposition, and the squares. Those are where you usually see a lot of activity. That's kind of going on here. And I would think with the moon squaring Jupiter, it's like you could have maybe this, we just came off this a big sort of surge of transits that were happening. So maybe there were a lot of inspirations that were coming up, a lot of these things, and now it's just figuring out like, okay, we have this stuff that we want to do, but now it's like, how do we get the funding to do it? For example, we're trying to start a business. Maybe that squares that we hit a bit of a jam here. It's like, it's not that it can't be done, but it's just going to be more work than, it's not when Jupiter was a trine and things were just giving a lot easier, in order to get this, abundance, in order to get this relief, this thing that we're doing, it's going to just require more effort, and I think that there's a chance for, too, with moon square and Jupiter's, I think or when the moon squares the benefics, I think it could come across as like a taking something for granted, not appreciating something until it's been damaged, or just something along those lines. I could see, just thinking about how the moon can deal with, with like possessions and things like this even gives to, Jupiter is that idea of trust and kind of like justice and sort of like arbitration, and I could think that, maybe there could be some sort of like, just unrest there. I think that sometimes they're like trying to find that hope, in the midst of, just wherever we're just happen to maybe be at, and I think that can be that maybe challenge of one's kind of faith there. And I think that is an invitation with that square energy to get oneself back in balance. I think that those squares is not just to inflict. I think that and sometimes, there are just hard things that can happen, but then it's like we can, once we've processed that, and start, and get back moving. It's like, okay, how did I want to come out of that experience? How is that added to this story? What does that look like there? So it can be tricky, I think, sometimes when you get into these sort of like squares and sort of harder aspects with the benefics. I think that, so there's something to just kind of think about there. But then we get into the 25th here, and the moon moves into Taurus, which we like a moon in Taurus. It enters into Taurus at about 10:05 a.m. Pacific time. Before we talk about the aspects, let's just talk about the moon in Taurus for a little bit. If you're looking at the chart, I got the moon up here at 0 degrees of Taurus. And this is where the moon finds itself in its exaltation. This is these couple days where the moon, is, after its home space, the moon loves it here. This is where the moon is raised up, where the moon can do moon stuff best. I think that this can be a great time to really get embodied, go out there and just experience just life, as you can find time. Because Taurus they're ruled by Venus, and this Venus is home, and they are the fixed earth sign, and they're one of the nocturnal signs, so more receptive quality. And I think it's about going out there and just appreciating the bounty, thinking about going out to look, if the weather's clear, going to look at the sunrise and the miracle that is, looking at the moonrise, whenever now that the moon is starting to get where you can see, or even seeing where the moon sets. Watch the moon move. It's fascinating to watch these, celestial bodies just move across the sky. The moon's fast. The moon is neat, and I think I just picture just a, you think of that Taurian energy, that Venusian energy wants to feel harmonious, wants to feel good, wants to feel comfortable, whether it be in its things and with its family, with its friends, and its, in its home, in its city, whatever that's looking at, a park. I think that that's a great time, even just in the body, just how, on a base level, the moon again represents the body, how you feel, like what could use some nurturing, what could use some love, how can we slow down a bit and maybe even develop some newer habits to take care of the body, to accommodate the body differently, the vessel that we're inhabiting here, taking some time to just how's the air that you're breathing, the things. Take some time for some cleansing breaths if you can get some, working with, I'm thinking even just like herbs and things, maybe boiling some rosemary, even just like smelling something, just to get some, that olfactory sense can be a very powerful, just kind of space, the power of scents and things can be really, aromas can be really kind of nice there. But then, and then really drink that up because then we start off with let's shift gears here. What a change, because then we get to the moon squaring Mars, and that's that's never great. Those are, I won't say it's never great, but those are going to be more challenging aspects, especially with the malefics. Those are going to be, this I think can be a time where just to be mindful of, go at a Taurian pace, as opposed to maybe like a fiery Aries or, kind of, or even like Leo or Sag maybe response. It's like, what, let me process it, be, no making any sort of like rash decisions, coming from as level-headed as possible. I think that can be a way to work with the Moon Mars square, but I think that can be a time where we do want to kind of slow down a bit. This can be a time where there could be kind of accidents and things along those lines, I wouldn't be, driving around super crazy. That would be just something to think about, watching how we're handling things, and again, just kind of handling the body. This could be where just like some sort of injury could potentially happen. Maybe you'd be like me, you cut your finger, or you could be where trip or something like that. So just being mindful. I think that can be just a great time whenever there's really kind of those kind of hard, taking care of, like, you're just like making sure to hydrate. Mars can be, just the malefics represent that idea of sickness, the things that are contrary to the life-giving forces of the benefics. And so, but, in learning to combat those illnesses and things, you develop these good practices, you can pass those nurturing qualities along, become authorities in that too, get recognized for that moon squared sun. But, the moon squaring the sun now we're at the first quarter, and that can be feeling a bit unsettled, where the body and the mind aren't quite, are just like at odds with one another. This could be feeling, noticing that people may be feeling a little bit off there. So that could be kind of something that there could be something that's happening with the sun representing authorities, maybe something with the, maybe an action that's taken at your job, or maybe in your city, your country, whatever that happens to look like. It's a yeah, it feels like an irritable pocket, and something to think about. I remember again reading in Valen's book, mentioning, and I've read this in a couple of books, where especially when the moon is waxing, and it's forming these kind of hard aspects with Mars. Mars is in the overcoming position here, so it's got that, so that can be, again, just kind of some trickiness, that you want to, just kind of pay attention to, depending on how this resonates. Because then we get to the 26th, and it's just, as you see, just a lot of squares that are happening. Even this, I didn't go back and do a lay of the land, but as you can see, it's nothing but squares. And thankfully, we kind of got Venus in the mix to help kind of smooth that out. And the moon aspects to Jupiter too. But let's move on. Let's move on to the 26th here, because then the moon's going to square Mercury, and that can be where there's again like that not thinking before we speak, just like the mouth getting ahead of the head and just kind of speaking reactive of sort of speech. That's what I can see this showing up to show materializing as. And then you got the moon squaring Venus. Now we have something where the maybe relationships are tense. Maybe you happen to say something to a spouse, out of a, kind of lashing out, or maybe say something to a child or something like that, or someone said something to you or something to the however that anger can sometimes move, that irritation, that frustration can move. So this would just be one where something I would just be kind of mindful of. But the squares too, something I should also mention, that I think squares can also be very stimulating. I think that they can be a call to action. I think a moon squared Mercury there can be some, again, because this could be a lot of like, maybe you're noticing the mind is moving a lot more, maybe feeling a bit more active, and that might feel a little uncomfortable there, maybe not sure what to do with the thoughts and things, and I think that when we got moon square Venus, doing some things to just kind of, again, take care of the body, some self-care, where we, tend to those energies or to those areas that need that Venusian love, that moon nurturing aspect, moon Venus, but I think moon Venus too, a lot can come up with this. I think that can be some envious energy sometimes, some jealousy. That's something that I've read with those two, pettiness. There's something that comes up with that. But yeah, the squares can be, as you can see, I got a lot of thoughts on them, and it can be very active time there. But I like that the moon ends up with forming a sextile with Jupiter in this. I think that there's something where some good can come from this area, or either some good can come from a situation, or we may have to, depending on how that goes, could be where, okay, situations happen, so now what do I do with that? Where do I go with that? And this could be where, if you're having a situation there, moon sextile Jupiter, and if you need some help or some kind of assistance, that might be where that Jupiter there could be an opportunity there, to do some sort of like to reach out for whatever assistance that you might need there. So that's pretty much wraps up the week. So I kind of like that let me go ahead and switch over. Oh, that meant to be a little more graceful, but I like that wraps up the week. It ends on that sort of like, and I guess that, again, that can be sort of a mixed bag depending on the situation, but life, I think, where whatever happens, we try to keep moving. We keep it. I like saying that. We keep it moving, and it doesn't have to be always at the same pace. It's just like, maybe we're moving real slow, but we keep it moving. There are gonna be days when we're moving real fast, and we're moving great. But the other times it's like it's okay to keep it moving at different paces depending on the phases we're at in our life. And again, that moon sextile Jupiter is making, I think, the most of what we have. I think that sometimes I think that there's an expectation that Jupiter's just going to give something. And sometimes it gives in perspective, where it's just like, oh, you know what? Yeah, okay. Like, could I want more? Sure. But you know what? I'm grateful for what I have. And you know what? Honestly, there might be some things I could maybe make some more space for some different things to maybe potentially come in there. It creates maybe a different sense of like appreciation for the, maybe the things for the relationships, or for, not just like love relationships, but just like friend relationships that you have, familiar relationships. Just those, maybe, thinking about different memories and things like that. I just had a nice conversation. Someone was saying that they were, thinking about it, things, Jupiter dealing with inheritance. Someone was telling me that they inherited their great grandmother's ring, and to have that memory there, to have that attached there, it's nice. It may not be a replacement for the person, obviously, but it's not a bad substitute, if there has to be one. So it can, that's where I think Jupiter can kind of give too. Sometimes it's in those maybe sort of like subtle ways that it happens, but you creates this different appreciation to what Jupiter can give, and the goodness that it can give, and how that goodness can give. So yeah, just a lot to think about this week. lot to think about, but I think that's going to be the tensest of it. Will be that little square pocket. I'll be curious to see how those sextiles are gonna play out there too. And this is something where how did your last week go? Just kind of looking at this our last period of time. Like this, usually we get about 3 signs, about 3 or 4 signs, and Moon and Scorpios for me, just doing a personal reflection. Most of the time, those can be a bit tenser, more often than not. But this last one was pretty good. I enjoyed myself. Like that was I like that. That was a nice Moon in Scorpio. It was very. It was intense in some. It was intense in some pockets, but not bad intense, but just different. I learned some things. It was a fascinating period of time. Sag carried that energy, that time in Scorpio created a real kind of nice buoyancy. Yeah, I'm like bouncing as I'm talking about it. Created this nice buoyancy in Sagittarius that I kind of carried through there. Capricorn was pretty chill. Capricorn kind of mellowed out a little bit. Saturn's like, all right, that's enough. That's enough. So yeah, Capricorn was pretty chill, but yeah, that was pretty much my times, and those are usually pretty how that goes. It's like there will be a bit more activity in Scorpio, and then it's like a little bit easier in Sag. Sometimes there's some Sag will throw a curveball every now and again, but not too often. Now it's more often than not it's a good time when the Moon's in Sag for me. So yeah, I like that. Yeah, it depends. It depends, but more often than not, again, I like that. But yeah, I'd love to hear how this week was for you. How you kind of navigated that. How the Moon maybe kind of translated. Kind of showed up in your chart. It's cool when you track that. When you kind of see how that goes there. I usually like when the Moon's in Taurus. I'm excited for that one. There usually is some sort of like career thing that happens, some sort of like recognition for something or another. So like I always find that really fascinating, and so I'd like to hear how that energy showed up for you. And if that's something that you want to navigate further, down in the description box, there's a link to book a reading with me, book a consultation. So if that's something that you're interested in, definitely check that out. My email's down there if you have any questions about the services that I provide. There's a couple links one for Lunar Shenanigans, and there's another one for the Celestial News Monthly, where it's a monthly analysis of what the sun and the other classical planets are doing, what sign they're in, when they're happen to go retrograde or indirect, and eclipses, things along those lines. I talk about all that. I talk mainly about the lunar eclipses here, and I'll talk about the solar eclipses on the other one usually. I'm not sure if I've actually stuck to that or not, but I'm going to if I haven't been. So that's something to think about. But so that's available for you, and there's these videos. It's been busy. It's been busy, but I have these videos. I'm actually going to be releasing one here soon. Probably after I might release it when the moon moves in the Pisces. But I'll be releasing a video coming out I have these series of videos that talk about different planets and different zodiac signs in different houses, and there's all sorts of playlists for that. So, and if I haven't done your sign yet, just leave a comment, and that'll be usually the next video that comes out. I keep them all in a queue, so that's available. Is available for you as well. So, but I think that's all I got for you. Until next time, stay mindful out there. Keep eyes on that moon. Get out there and look at that sky. The sky's been beautiful. And I will catch you on the next one. Later.